Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about our guest. Her name, LYNNE LIST. Her book, No Time to Regret. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining me on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Hello, it's so wonderful to be here with you.
Absolutely. And thank you for making time for us today. Now, before we get started talking about your book, everybody knows the tradition around here is that we give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few folks out there that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. So, first question for you, Lynn, is what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Well, I'm a retired professor emeritus. I have a PhD. I taught at the undergraduate and graduate levels after a career as a classroom teacher, a reading teacher, and a reading consultant. I have been retired for a while now, and in my retirement, I have written plays and won some awards. And I play bridge. I love duplicate bridge. It is the best thing possible to keep your mind nice and sharp. So that basically is my background.
I love it. I love it. I remember my grandmother used to braid bridge, and it was such a nice time to see the ladies get together and have what we would now call our girl time, and chit chat and all of that. It was such a nice thing to see. Always nice when there's girl time. I love it. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that life presented the opportunity and you said yes?
Well, actually, it's something I always wanted to do. I started writing as a journalist in high school. In fact, I recall interviewing Milton Berle, and that was my first exciting writing time. And then I wrote poetry, but truthfully, once I got married and began having children, I have 3 children, and I got my doctorate. I was in school, and then I was busy teaching. I didn't have time to write. But once I was retired, I started writing again, and that was primarily plays that we did in an amateur way. But it's interesting how I came back to this. Evidently, I had started this book many years ago, put it aside, and during the pandemic, while cleaning out a bookcase, I found the manuscript. I read it. I loved it. It wasn't complete, and I decided to finish it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, I definitely want to give you some more time to talk about how the book came about and all of that. So please excuse me for over talking you there. Now, the title of your book, No Time to Regret. I like the title. How did you come about the title? Did the title come to you first? Did it develop out of your writings? How did it come about?
The title developed out of the writing, and actually it can be taken 2 ways, and I hope the readers all do. It could be that this is not the time to regret, no time to regret, or there is no time to regret, and it's your outlook on life. How do you view your life? Can you look back and have time to regret what you've done, or is there no time and you should forget it? Though it grew out of the writing itself. And people who have read the book come to me and they say, what did you mean? And I said, it's not what I mean. What do you think it means? And that's really what it should be. And everyone draws their own conclusion.
I like that. I like that. I am one of those people who looks at those words and say, if you've learned the lesson, there is no regret. You know, life can teach, will throw a lot of stuff at you. And I think that, if you've learned a lesson if you've gained something from something that has happened to you, then there is no regret. I think that if you've ever lived a life, perhaps you've been sick or you've loved someone and lost that someone, or an opportunity has, gotten away from you, so on and so forth. It's like, don't live in that regret. Don't let that chew on you. Make sure you live the lesson that you have learned. I love it, but I love how you left it kind of very ambiguous there. You left it vague on purpose for the reader to be able to walk the path that they want to take. I love that. I love it. Now, as far as writing was concerned, did you find that there was a particular time of day that really worked more for you? I know that many writers will say, I wanted to write during the early morning, before like the world woke up, or many say at the end of the day, like when the world has gone to sleep, let's say. Did you find there was a particular time where writing was easiest for you?
Yes. Well, it was during the pandemic, and I set aside every day from 12:30 to 4:30 just to write. And nothing disturbed me at that time, no phone calls, no television, no computer. I said, I'm going to write. And I did that for months until the book was complete. And that I didn't want to write at night. That's my relaxing time, and I like to read, so I can read at night. And early in the morning, I'm not an early morning person, so that was when I did my writing.
I have to agree with you there. I think all of us that are not the morning people, we totally and completely understand that. And I have to give kudos to my family for understanding that though I may be up at 6 a.m., I'm not necessarily happy about it. It's like, let me get my morning cup of coffee, give me my Americano, and then I'm good to go. Then we can talk. So
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I understand that. Now, do you think that because of your education and the fact that you have been a professor, that all of that experience, as well as running a household, being, a wife and mom and all of that, that has helped you with organizing your day in order to be effective in your writing?
Absolutely. There's no question. I found that my studies started at 10 at night. Well, I was much younger, and I did all my work between 10 at night and 2 in the morning after the children were in bed and everything was quiet in the household. And I found that I had to be extremely organized, and you have to be, especially when you get to the point, as you know, doing a dissertation, that you have to be very, very organized. I was set back by a year because, unfortunately, my father passed away while I was in the midst of data collection. So it threw me off by a year. I had to stop, and the data I was collecting, I couldn't get again for a period of time.
Yeah.
But very, 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 in those days, as I said, all my work and my reading and everything was all 10 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning. That was the way I fit it all in and took care of the children and the house,
And, I think that most people, as they heard you just share that, they were thinking, of course, sometimes you just have to take that time off and really get that part of you back before you can venture off back into your education. And like you said, you have to be so organized during that time. And I think anyone who has that higher education, you guys know how hard that is. You know how hard it was to get your master's. You know how hard it was to get your PhD. And it's like you really and truly do need to be in the right headspace in order for that to happen. So, I'm a daddy's girl. I love my dad up one side and down the other. So I know how it affected me when my father passed. So
Yes.
I can definitely understand that you needed to step back for that. Most definitely. Now, as far as inspiration is concerned, I know that many authors have a particular thing that happens or a particular someone who has said something that really kind of gives you that spark, that nudge, if you will, that says, yeah, now is the time for me to put this book out there. Did you have such inspiration, or did you have someone who nudged you and said, now is the time?
No, I did. Well, I said now was the time. As I said, I began this writing many years ago and then found the manuscript and finished it. But the reason that I started it, I have lived through several wars: World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Iran, Iraq. And I know that there were many lonely servicemen who had romances with girls wherever they were stationed, a girl in every port, they used to say about sailors. And today, I know that there are many young people who are rather promiscuous, and I know personally of cases where children found out in adulthood that they were adopted, or they suddenly found out that they didn't know anything about their background because the fathers either abandoned them or the mother did not know who the father was, and I'm sure you're familiar with those cases as well. But it seemed that there are so many more now because of promiscuity, and I became interested in these babies. What happens to them? It was out of my speculation that the plot was born for No Time to Regret, which was based on an illicit affair where a child was born and what happens later on in life. So I wonder, and actually my thoughts go even further. I wonder if with the situation, the moral situation we have today, and what we have with so many babies who are abandoned and adopted and so on, I wonder if we're going to have to require DNA testing when people get a marriage license in order to find out whether there's any relationship. It just seems to be so much going on, and I know of 2 or 3 cases where they suddenly, one where he found out that his fiancée was actually his sister.
Oh, my heavens.
Yeah. So
wow.
It can happen. It can happen.
Most definitely. You know, yeah. you are hitting a few nails on the head there, because I don't think that folks realize that. To give a little bit of perspective, my father was born in 1935, so folks know that I talk about my grandmother, his mother, that was born in 1908, and his dad in 1903. I love my pioneering grandparents, if you will, in that they were born during a time where that most people's grandparents were a little, were not quite as old. I'll just put it that way. So I have a different perspective about how my grandparents were able to share with me. And, you know, my dad in sharing very similar stories as well. It's like, look at what we have lived through. You know, I have stories to share that may never be shared again. And you're right. Many of the our servicemen of color were not able to go back to those countries and get those children because it was illegal. It was against the law for them to go back. So you are so right. And to find that out as an adult, that, oh, wow, your dad didn't abandon you, but he legally couldn't come, nor could your mother go and seek him. You know, that's a whole different, you know, story. You are so right. And how those poor kids must have felt growing up thinking that no one loved them or that they weren't thought about. That is a wound that definitely will take time to heal. And I know that's one, at least, that I've had an opportunity to talk to someone about. Oh, I love that you are allowing people to have that space, to have that conversation. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, then it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, the title is No Time to Regret, and my website is No Time to Regret LYNNE List, and that's Lynn with an E at the end, lynnelist.com. And the book is available on Amazon. It's available at all bookstores, all major bookstores. And getting in touch with me through my website easily, or through, my publisher, Archway Publishing. You
absolutely. Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. My guest today is LYNNE List, and we are talking about her book, No Time to Regret. Now, Lynn, before we went to break, you said something really important there, and you were wondering if there's going to come a time where perhaps we need to do DNA testing or do that blood test again to get married. Now, I am not of the generation that required the blood test in order to get married, but my parents were, and they tell me about that, and you go, really? You had to do that? But when you Google the purpose behind it, you go, oh, that makes sense. Like with your story. Oh, I can't imagine if that young man, how he would have felt finding out that his wife was his sister simply because he didn't know. And you're right. We do need to make sure that we delve a little deeper and find out about the people that are in our lives. Now, is this the type of stories that we get to hear? I know that your book is in the genre of fiction and romance. Is this the type of drama that we get to hear about in the book?
Yes. Actually, the book is a compelling story that highlights a moral dilemma. Can we divorce ourselves from the unforeseen consequences of our past actions, or must we accept responsibility for them regardless of the cost? When we find out something that from the past that has now come into our lives, must we, if we accept the decision to, how should we protect? Do we protect our families? Who should suffer? Can we destroy a life to protect our own is really what I'm saying. When you've done something in the past that you now have to face, can we admit it, or we destroy somebody else's life to just protect your own life and your own family? That's basically what it is. Yeah.
And that is a great question to pose, because I think that many times we forget that our society has changed its point of view on a lot of things. I remember the stories of my parents' generation, that baby boomer or that silent generation, those 30s, 40s, 50s babies out there, saying how many times if a young girl or an unmarried girl became pregnant, she would, leave and go stay with a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle in another location until she had that baby and put that baby up for adoption and then come back to her hometown. And I wonder how many of those babies find out about those stories. And you're right. Do you find your birth mother? Does your birth mother accept you? Does her new family know that you exist? Yeah, I see what you're talking about, where we don't hear about that going on as much anymore. So it is something that we have to ask. How do we deal with all of that? I love it. Now, I know that your book is listed as being fiction, but for so many fiction writers, they are inspired by things, of course, in the real world. So percentage-wise, how much would you say is fiction and how much is kind of nonfiction, or at least based off of a truth in general?
Well, the basis of the story is based on fact. because I happen to have known someone who had an illegitimate child and walked away. He was supposedly in love with the lady, but she was already married, and he walked away from it not knowing whether it was his child or not. And that's the basis of the story, because now this child is grown and now comes back into his life. And by the way, what you said about these children, many of them, the adoptions are illegal adoptions done by an attorney, and therefore they have no idea and cannot find out anything about their past, if it's not a legal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's even, that's just adding another layer of potential pain there, not knowing who they are at all. Oh wow, I didn't even realize that. That is so true.
Yeah, a lot of them get DNA and they check that way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank God for that, for the people who really, really want to know that is true. That is a particular route to go, and through the process of elimination, I suppose you can figure out who your birth parents are. So that's true. But if it weren't for that bit of technology, then they would be in the dark like so many before them have been. So wow, I tell you, sometimes technology is a beautiful thing. Sometimes it may be overwhelming to folks, but it can be used for a greater good if we just put our energies towards that. So I love that. Now, one of the things that I have noticed is that you are referred to as Grandma Moses of literature. I have to ask, how did that name, that moniker, come about?
Well, the truth is that my first novel was written when I was 90 years old. So I think that puts me in the category of the Grandma Moses of literature. I don't think most authors begin at age 90, although I wrote before, but many years ago, textbooks for professional, I didn't do a novel. And that's where it came about.
I love it. And you're right. There are not a lot of senior authors out there. I think you are about maybe my second or third author who has been in their 90s. And I love it. I applaud all that you guys are doing, because you're sharing information, wisdom. You are sharing life stories. You are sharing a perspective that is starting to kind of fade, if you will, simply because time is moving forward. I know that I personally adored my grandmother, my paternal grandmother. So sitting down and listening to her stories was something that I enjoyed. Even as a 16-year-old, I would just go over my grandmother's because I wanted to go make a pie with her and just be in her presence. So I think that the stories that you guys are sharing, we need to hear, because if we don't take those stories down, then those stories will be lost. So I love that you have presented that in a book for future generations to be able to go back and read and get your wisdom, your bits of wisdom out of it. I love it. Now, speaking of writings and what you plan to do in the future, I know that many folks will say, Dr. Angela, listen, I did one book. That's all God has called me to do. I'm not doing any more. Others have said, I've been bitten by the author's bug. I cannot wait to write my next book. Where are you as far as your future writings are concerned?
I have written a sequel to No Time to Regret called Tomorrow is Today, and at the moment I'm seeking a publisher. So that's where I am. It is a sequel. It follows the lives of the same people, but it's a completely different kind of story. And I think anyone who reads this book and will want to follow the life of the story, because when this No Time to Regret ends, it leaves a question in everyone's mind, and that question will be answered in the second book. So if I can find a publisher, tomorrow is today will come out soon. I hope.
I like that, kind of a pre-trailer, a little teaser, if you will, to the release of the new book. I love it. I love it. And, with everyone being able to listen to the show, be it that you are listening to this on radio, or perhaps you're catching the rebroadcast and you're streaming this on your favorite app. If you're interested, you never know, there might be a partnership here that can work out. I love it. I love it. Now, my last question, we're almost at the end. We have about 3 minutes left in the show. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask is about location. I know that location can have a positive or a negative effect on how we live our lives. I know that being in Southern California, folks laugh and say, all that beautiful sunshine, Dr. Angela, you guys are always in a great mood. My question to you is, you are in beautiful St. Thomas. Do you think that the sunshine there has a positive effect on your outlook of life, on your attitude as well?
Oh, absolutely. Life in St. Thomas has been just fantastic. I unfortunately left it just shortly, but I love the island. The island is laid back. It's quiet. It's the whole attitude is completely different and certainly conducive to enjoyment and extension of life. I think that truly extends your life.
I could not agree with you more. I think that we have to take the time to recharge our batteries. However, we need to do that. I know for so many folks, it's going to the mountains or going to the beach or, taking a cruise or whatever it is. But we need to do that for our own sanity and just to make sure that we stay balanced. I love that. Thank you for that prompting. Now, my last question before I let you go is about your faith. Not if you go to church every Sunday or, if you pray X amount of times a week, nothing like that, but just a very general, broad question. And that is, do you think that your faith has helped play a part in the person that you are today? Has it gotten you through your life? What do you think about that?
It definitely has. There's no question. I have deep faith, and I am not... the faith is within me. I'm not one who runs to services or all the time, but the faith I do believe, and I always will believe, and it does get me through, especially when we lose people we love. It's that faith that helps. I feel that my mother is with me all the time, regardless. So.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I believe that my dad is with me, that my grandmother is with me. And people think that it's weird when folks say that, and it's like, you don't mean like in a ghostly kind of way, but that, their presence, their love, their words of wisdom, that they are definitely still with you. I know that I still lean on all that they have poured into me to help keep me going. And faith is such a big part. Thank you for reminding someone that it can be a big part of your life, and you can definitely be successful as well. I love it. Well, Lynne List, thank you so much for coming on and spending time with me here today. But before I let you go, can you please remind everyone one last time, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Thank you. The book is No Time to Regret. It's available at Amazon. Online, you can go to No Time to Regret LYNNELIST.com, and there's a contact place there's a page there for contacting me. and any bookstore, Amazon, as well as all the bookstores. The book is available, and I hope that your readers will enjoy it and will get the book. And thank you so much for having me on to talk about it.
Well, Dr. List, thank you for spending time here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I have very much enjoyed my time with you today, and thank you again for coming on and sharing about your book today.
Thank you again. It's my pleasure.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about our author. His name is Sohail Malik, and we're talking about his book, Believe. Now come on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. I am so excited to have you on the show today, Sohail. Thank you so much for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
You're most welcome, Dr. Angela. It's very kind of you to host me.
Absolutely. Now, I cannot wait to talk to you about your book, but as is tradition here on the show, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people out there that are unfamiliar with you or your work. So my first question to you is, what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Dr. Angela. I was born and raised in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. As a small child, I grew up in the historic city of Nottingham, where the tales of Robin Hood and Sherwood Forest sort of enchanted me as a younger boy, and my teachers were amazing, and they led me down this path of reading and the enchantment that books provide. And I used to read a lot, quite fascinated by stories of my childhood sort of authors, and then I decided to write. And then when I sort of started going down this path, and I wrote my first sort of few short stories, and that sort of got me hooked into more. And then I showed it to some friends and family. They said, "Hey, this is good stuff, keep going." And that's how I sort of started writing. And obviously you put your heart into writing, and if people do appreciate or like your stories, then that inspires you to keep going. And that's how it sort of led me to write my first book and get it published to Author House.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And it's always great when you can connect a place to something in your life personally. It makes the story come alive, if you will. So I definitely understand that. Now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that life finally presented the opportunity and you were able to take advantage of it?
To be honest with you, I didn't actually plan out to be an author from day one. I did a variety of jobs. I worked in a bank. I worked in an insurance company. I became a driving instructor. But always back in the back of my mind, I don't know, I mean, I'm a Capricorn star sign, so Capricorns are quite sort of fluent in writing, and they have sort of good imaginations. And I always sort of in the back of my mind, deep in my heart, I had this desire. I've had so many stories in my life that have inspired me, that have happened to me, and I'd like to share those stories with other people. And that sort of kept on nagging at me until I sort of picked up a pen and said, okay, let's just write something down. And in my sort of mid-30s, I picked up a laptop and I started typing, and it sort of just clicked together from there. And I wrote 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, and it sort of became like a semi-finished novel. And then I gave it to my friends and family. They said, no, you put so much effort, you need to finish this. And that's how I sort of just said, okay, so I devoted 2 years of my life to this book, Believe, and that's how I managed to complete it in the end. But I didn't intend to be a writer from the beginning, but it was always one of my loves, and it sort of followed me around for a long time until I got this book out of my system.
I love that you say, you had to get it out. You had to get it out. And it's like, absolutely, there's no way you can keep all of this to yourself. And shout out to those friends who really know us that say, absolutely, you cannot keep this to yourself. You must share this with the world. Because they see something many times that future readers of the book are going to see. This part here, it's amazing. You really need to get that out there. So good job. I'm glad they encouraged you to do that. Now, the title of your book, I love it. Quite simple, but one very powerful word, Believe. Why was it important to entitle your book, Believe?
Dr. Angela, that's a very good question. A title is what catches the sort of your potential reader's imagination. I mean, if it's a title that clicks with people, or they sort of just catches their eye, then obviously they're going to pick up a book, look at the cover, look at the blurb at the back, and maybe end up sort of buying it or reading it. Believe is a very powerful word. I mean, as human beings, obviously, we have our own beliefs, things that happen to us, to our families, the struggles that we go through in life. And obviously you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in religion or in God or in your family. So it's quite a powerful word in our lives. You have to believe in something to keep you going through not only just the good times, but always through the sort of difficult times as well. So I mean, it's a word that's sort of renowned with me, and I sort of, just clicked with me and said, for the story, the type of story that I'm writing, this just seemed so right for it, and I sort of said, okay, let's just stick with Believe. It can relate to a lot of people out there.
I really like that answer. I really do. We have to believe. I think for so many people, they have lost that sense of hope. That the desire to just keep moving forward, even when not quite sure, to kind of step out in faith. So you are so right there. We have to keep believing. I love it. Now, as far as your writing process was concerned, for many of the authors that I talk with, they had certain things that they needed to happen in order for their writing to be considered successful for that day. They needed peace and quiet. They needed lots of coffee or lots of tea. They needed the environment to be just right. When you were writing, was it important for you to have a certain atmosphere or certain things around you in order for you to be productive in your writing?
Yes, again, Dr. Angela, this is what most writers find very important. You need to have a calm environment where you can sort of, writing comes from the heart as well as the mind. So you need a place where you can sort of reflect upon your emotions, and you find inspiration all around you in the people that are, they're in your life, where you see people walking down the street, or if it's a bright sunny day or a rainy day, or a song that plays in your head, or a movie scene that plays in your head. You pick up inspiration from everywhere. I believe God provides you inspiration, and you need a place where you can just, be by yourself. So I had my laptop in a sort of quiet room. I had a sort of a window overlooking my garden, and the sunlight used to come inside, and that was quite peaceful for me, where I could be alone with just myself and my thoughts. And, I'd gather, everything I had in my mind. Sometimes I'd set myself a target. I'm going to write 50 words today. Sometimes I'd end up writing 500 or 1,000. And, it just depended on how much inspiration just flowed through you that day. But definitely, most writers, I would say, would agree, that we need a calm, collective place where we can gather our thoughts and be inspired to write. And I was lucky enough to find that place.
I don't think that many people think about the creative process for authors. I think that many times you think of it when it comes to musicians, because that's something that they say, I went off into the studio, I was away creating music. But I think people forget that writers need to have that as well, and to be able to really share their thoughts and to be able to get the storyline that's in their head, or the poetry or whatever it is that's in their head, onto paper, or into the laptop, I guess, so that they're able to get it out to the rest of us. So it's really important. Thank you for that reminder. Now, one of the things that you talk about is having that spiritual connection. Why do you believe that it is important for us to believe in God, to have that relationship with God? How do you address that in the book?
Thank you, Dr. Angela. It's a very good question again. I believe, as everybody has a right, whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, that is your own individual choice. But, as you go through life, certain things, you witness things, and things happen to your life, to your loved ones and your family. And we all come to that point, where we feel totally alone and powerless. And, when you're in that situation, and if it's just that solitude between yourself and and your creator, or your Lord, and in those depths of your darkest moments in life, when you actually ask something, or ask for guidance, or seek prayer, or help, and everybody has their own sort of coping mechanism, and everybody sort of picks themselves up. But I do feel many sort of points in my life where I was sort of going through difficult times, and I asked, and I received the sort of answer through one form or another, and that just sort of strengthened me, and I knew that there is somebody out there. There is a higher power out there, my creator, or God, or my Lord, or however people would address their maker. And I felt that I had, I wasn't alone. I wasn't just like, completely in the dark and nobody would answer me. But, and that's sort of one prayer got answered, and it strengthened me, and then it led to another prayer, and another prayer, and that sort of, my personal faith got strengthened by knowing that I'm not alone. And through our darkest and sort of hardest times in life, all we can do is sort of, ask for guidance, and God does hear us, and we receive it.
I love that. I love that answer. Now, we have about 2 minutes left in this particular segment, but I want to ask you about the proper way to utilize your book. For many authors, they will say, it's best if you read this book from cover to cover, page after page. Others will say perhaps it's more like a devotional, where you should read a page or two, a day, put it down, digest it, think about it, roll it around in your head, if you will. But then others will say it's a chapter book, take in X amount of pages in that chapter and or section, and really think about that before moving on. What do you think is the best way to really take in all that you have shared in your book, Believe?
Thank you, Dr. Angela. Again, this is the individual reader's choice. All three methods that you described are all good. It depends on how the reader sort of prefers to read. My personal preference would be to read it chapter by chapter. I mean, I followed some writing, sort of some authors' guides and sort of some authors' recommendations. They said in every chapter, if you leave a hook for the reader, it's like a surprise ending, or a surprise sort of something that gets the reader addicted or hooked in every chapter. So they want to lead from one chapter to the next, to the next, to the next. If you put in just a really boring chapter in the middle of your book, and then the reader will say, right, the last chapter was really, really good, interesting, and this one is not really, it's a bit bland. I don't see where the sort of and you lose the reader's interest. So my aim was to keep every chapter lively and interesting for the reader. So he would, okay, I want to read the next one and next one, and you'd slowly build the tension up, like in a good movie, towards the climax of the movie. And that's what I intended to do. So I would say, at least a chapter. My chapters aren't very long. They're maybe about 18, 19 pages per chapter. It's not a very big book, but yeah, I would say request my readers to read at least a chapter, reflect upon it, and then maybe the next day the following chapter. That is my preferred method. and I've tried to sort of build the tension up through the chapters leading towards the climax, and hopefully the readers might enjoy reading that.
Now, see, that's why I asked that question. Because I know that the authors are going to have some type of suggestion there, that it doesn't matter how you read it, or even if there's a particular instruction. I love asking because you guys wrote the book, and it's always to go best to the source to ask what is the best way to get the most out of the book, and I think that's important. Thank you so much for that. Well, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, can you please remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes, certainly, Dr. Angela. The title of my book is Believe by S.F. Malik, which is myself, Sahil Malik. It's easily available on Amazon as an ebook, and also you can get it in paperback or hardback copy. And Barnes & Noble, I believe, also in the US, is available in the Barnes & Noble website as well. You can type in Believe by S.F. Malik on Facebook, and you'll be able to follow me there as well. And also on Instagram, SF Malik, Believe by SF Malik again, and it is quite easily available.
Alrighty, everyone, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. My guest today is Sahil Malik, and we are talking about his book, Believe. I know, that is such an awesome title for a book and an awesome instruction, Believe. Now, my next question for you is, one of the things that I believe that you talk about or just in the book is children, and how they are, I don't want to say suffering, but that we have so many children that are not in the best condition, right? I guess they are suffering around the world. How do you address that in your book?
Thank you, Dr. Angela. Yeah, this is the whole theme of my book. I mean, it sort of follows these sort of books. If you're familiar with, obviously, the world knows the Hunger Games and so on and so forth. And obviously, unfortunately, we live in a world where children are suffering, even though none of us really want them to suffer. But if you look in war-torn countries or famine-ridden countries along the world, and children seem to go through the hardest and the harshest sort of forms of suffering, for if they don't have food, or they don't have clothes, or they don't have medical supplies, or they're being exploited through sort of child soldiers and child labor and so on and so forth. So, I mean, obviously nobody wants children to suffer anywhere, but I did relate these chapters in my book. I mean, children can go through these sort of horrific things that happen that should never actually happen to them, but you will find they are very resilient. They're resourceful, and even though they don't have the sort of strength of adults in sort of there, but they're very steadfast and they're very sort of forbearing. And whatever you throw at them, you will be surprised that the human spirit is so strong that they can actually endure the worst hardships and still live to be better people, and they can sort of inspire us to be even better. And obviously, hopefully, in my lifetime, or maybe not in my lifetime, but I'd like to see a world where children's suffering ends. No child should be allowed to suffer anywhere, but, maybe not in my lifetime, but in the future, we should all be moving toward a world where children don't have to suffer anymore, and that was sort of the theme of my book as well.
I have to agree with you there. I think that when we see a child suffering, it really pulls at our heartstrings a little bit differently. Many times we can rationalize why an adult might be in a particular situation. Oh, well, you should have gone to, college or university, or you shouldn't have done that stupid thing. You shouldn't have quit your job without having another job first. We can put a reason to why they may be in that situation, but for a child, it's of no fault of their own. So you're right. I think we do have a special place for children in our hearts. And wouldn't that be amazing if we could live in a world where children are all okay, no matter where they live in the world, but that we know that they are taken care of. I agree with you there. That's a great prayer to pray. Now, when it comes to, and you kind of touched on this too, when it comes to poverty, unfortunately, we have a lot of children that are living in a state of poverty. When we think of that, depending on where you live in the world, and we do have an international audience, so everyone may think of that a little bit differently. You know, here in the States, we have a certain type of poverty, but then you live in another country, and it may be a different level of poverty. Is that something that you address in your book as well? And if so, what are some of your suggestions for dealing with it? If we can't eradicate it within our lifetime, but perhaps in a generation or two, what are your suggestions there?
Thanks, Dr. Angela. Yes, certainly. Poverty obviously exists, unfortunately, in all parts of the world, even in these sort of modern countries that we live in, America, England, Europe, and so on and so forth. The theme that I touched in my book was because it's dystopian and it's based in the future, so there is a society that actually invents through science and technology machines that run endlessly on a fuel source that's sort of never ending, and they sort of become a society that has eradicated poverty because they have machines that produce food yields and energy yields relentlessly. But the cost and the catch is that you have to convert to their way of thinking and basically preaching and basically taking up the new religion in order to be free from that poverty. And you have to give up all sort of your beliefs or what your forefathers or your parents believed in. If you convert, you will be free from poverty. If you do not convert, then they will confine you with sort of rationing and sort of punishments and things like this that will sort of obviously make your life they sort of push you into a corner where either you convert or you die of hunger. So this was the theme that I touched on in my book. Obviously, you can't really force people to change their religion. That never really happens. People obviously have freedom of choice. But then obviously there was a backlash and a war followed. But unfortunately, the band of believers were the ones that actually lost the battle against the all-powerful empire of the state. And in which turn they sort of introduced this penalty that the firstborn child of every believing family or every believer sort of who were already living in sort of slum towns would become the property of the state on their 17th birthday and would be taken away for a lifetime of servitude and would never be seen again. So obviously this was the theme that I touched on in my book. In regards to your question, Dr. Angela, yes, we can eradicate poverty. We have masses of technology and money and food reserves, but unfortunately the way that we choose to, or governments choose to sort of distribute this among nations there's a lot of bureaucracy and politics involved. But I would like to see a world where sort of people put people first and not politics first, and hopefully we in our lifetime or maybe after our lifetimes we can see a world where hunger ends.
And I think that the next generation, our beautiful children that are of because I am now the age of the auntie. I am a parent myself of an adult child. So when I say that the children of, I think that they are doing a really great job. That next generation, our millennials, our Gen Zers, they're doing such an amazing job at speaking up and speaking out and kind of challenging their parents, their grandparents even, to, are we doing all that we can do? Are we being the best that we can possibly be. Now, without putting words into your mouth or anything, and we are on Christian radio, so I challenge everyone to say, are we being the best Christians that we can be? Are we making sure that we are taking care of the least of these, as Scripture reminds us to? So you're right. We do need to make sure that we are doing all that we can to address those things that need to be handled. I love it. I love it. Now, there are so many folks in the world that say, you know what? I hear what you guys are talking about. There's always going to be hunger. There's always going to be poverty. There's always going to be bad folk in the world. So what is God doing during this time? We're praying and we're asking, and some folks are fasting and believing for things to come true. I know that that's something that you address in your book. How should we address or discuss that with someone who may be kind of on the naysayers side that says, I just don't know if God is hearing our prayers?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Angela. This is it. You see, this is the main sort of some of my friends that I've spoken with, or who don't actually believe in God, and their sort of main argument or their main point of view is that if there is God, then why are people still suffering, and why don't our prayers get answered, and why doesn't He hear the calling of the people? And again, you have to go back to this sort of biblical scriptures and what God has taught us through the ages. If you look at the people of Prophet Moses, and how they suffered bondage for centuries before their call was finally heard. And I believe personally God does hear, but this life is very temporary, it's very short, and it's just a test from God. So there are three ways in which our prayers, I believe, can be answered. One is obviously you get an immediate answer straight away. So if you asked for something and you received it, then that's been answered. The second way would be that if you ask for something, you didn't actually receive it, but God will provided you with some sort of or protected you from some calamity in its place. Or so you sort of you didn't get what you wanted, but you got something that was second, sort of the best thing, that the best outcome that could have resulted for your prayer, even though it wasn't exactly what you asked for. So that would be another sort of way that it got answered. And the third possible way is that some prayers obviously don't get answered in this lifetime, but they are kept in like a safety deposit for our afterlife. So either God answers us straight away or saves us from some calamity, or if it doesn't get answered in this lifetime, then obviously I believe that this life isn't the only life, and there is life after death for us as well. And maybe God will give us some sort of recompense, or some sort of compensation, or some sort of blessing in our afterlife, in the hereafter. Obviously, because I believe that death isn't the end of life in itself.
Absolutely. So before I let you go, can you please remind everyone one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Thank you, Dr. Angela. Yes, certainly. My book is called Believe by S.F. Malik. You can just Google it up, Believe by S.F. Malik, or Barnes & Noble and Amazon will readily have copies available. And likewise, it was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you again for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it here with me today. Thank you for spending some time with me. As always, I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best. May the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.